What's up, guys? So I'm back with another training video today. Today we are looking at a leg session that I did over this past week here. You guys can go ahead and you can see the training programming here. You can go ahead and pause it and see what's going on. If it looks like the volume is pretty low, it is very, very low. And what you need to understand about why the volume is so low is because if you've been reading in my training log, I am currently training legs every 3 days. So in order to be able to hit legs and then again hit it in 3 days and then again hit it in 3 days, I need to be able to recover in 3 days. And really the only way that I can recover in 3 days is to keep the volume pretty low so that I can recover from it. So I'm starting off the session here. We are getting into some delt and some bicep work, and the reason why I do these in particular on my leg sessions is because during a push session I will always train my side delts, and I'll usually hit them with anywhere from 2 to 4 sets depending on how my recovery is going at the moment. And then on pull sessions, I am currently hitting 3 sets of biceps on my pull sessions. And what I have noticed between the side delt and the biceps is that both of these muscles, I can go into the gym and I can hit like 3 or 4 max effort sets of this muscle, wake up the next day and the muscle is a little sore, and then the day after that the soreness is completely gone. So what that tells me is that these muscles recover very, very well. And because they recover very, very well, I like to train them extremely frequently. So I don't remember right now, but I'm pretty sure in this particular week, what you guys are looking at is I'm pretty sure that I trained push. I think on this week I had to work on Saturday, so I was only training Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So I was training push on Monday, which means that I would hit my delts on Monday, and then I was training this leg session on Wednesday, and then I was doing a pull session on Friday, which means that I'm hitting delts on Monday and then biceps on Friday. But then I kind of get a long gap before I hit delts again. So, for example, I would have hit push on this Monday. I probably wouldn't have hit the next push session until Monday, Tuesday of the next week. So I'd be hitting 3, 4 sets of delts, and then I'd be going 7 to 8 days without training delts again. And it would be the same thing with the biceps. I would do the biceps on the pull session, and then I would have 7 to 8 days until I hit another pull session because I'm hitting legs so frequently right now. So what I like to do on the leg sessions is when the opportunity presents itself, I like to do some delt and some bicep work, or bicep work in the session, depending on when I last trained those muscles, just to kind of top up on some frequency. I'm really only doing one set, one max effort set, which is what you're watching. What after I finish the cuffed lateral raise, I move in to the dual or the bilateral cable curl using the same cable stack that I did for the lateral raises. I prefer to do these dual arm. This is actually one of the only exercises that I have in my entire training rotation that I do dual arm for my arm training. I like to do the majority of my arm training, especially biceps, with single arm unilateral exercises. It just allows me to align the muscle a little bit better and keep my elbows and wrists healthy and free of injuries as I'm doing the arm work. But the dual cable curl that you're watching there actually kind of lines up pretty perfectly with my arms, so I can get really good contractions out of that without feeling any pain. So after I kind of knock that stuff out, I like to do that stuff at the beginning of the session just to kind of get it done and get it over with, because at the end of a leg session, I really do not like to do any delt or arm work by the time I finish. And speaking of doing things at the beginning of the session instead of rather at the end, let's talk about some calf training here. So what you're going to see during this calf training clip is I'm doing 3 sets of work for my lower legs. So I am starting off with a seated calf raise here. I will be moving on to the standing calf raise after that. And then if you can see behind the seated calf raise here, there's actually a tibialis raise. I will be doing some tib raises at the end too. I've never really done tib raises before. I started throwing them in once I added this new leg training program. and I'm really liking them. It's super easy progressions. I haven't really been doing them long enough to be able to see an impact on my physique and full transparency, so that'd be something where you'd have to ask me in 6 months whether or not this is worth the time to do. But I have been doing some tib raises, and I'm liking how they're going. What I will do in my other leg session is if you're watching in this one, I'm doing the seated calf raise, and then I go to the standing calf raise. On the other leg session, I just flip those. So I start on the standing calf raise, and then I go into the seated, and then I go back into the tib raise. Whichever calf raise that I start doing first, I like to do sort of a shortened, focused rep tempo. So what you're watching here on these seated calf raises is I'm doing a 3-count pause in the stretch, and then I'm doing a 3-count pause at peak contraction. And I'm doing that because for the same reason, if you've been watching my training videos, when the muscle is fresh, I really like to spend some time in the shortened range. So I'm spending some time in the shortened position here on this calf raise, a 3-count hold at the top. So I'm counting 3, 2, 1 at the bottom. And then when I come up to peak contraction, I'm counting 3, 2, 1. Vice versa, when I go into the second calf raise, which is what you're watching here, I like to do a lengthened focused set here. So what you're watching is actually a 5-count pause in the stretch, and I'm only doing a 2-count pause in the peak contraction. So as I'm coming down into the peak stretch, I hit peak stretch, and then I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I initiate the contraction, and at the top, I just count 1, 2, and that's it. Because the calf is kind of fatigued from the seated calf raise before it, it's harder for me to spend a longer period of time in the shortened position. But I have some oomph left in the lengthened position of the muscle, so that's what I'm doing with the second calf raise. On my other leg session, how I said I flip those, I start with the standing and then I go into the seated. I keep the tempos the same. So on the other leg session, when I'm doing the standing calf raise first, I'm still using that 3-3 tempo, 3 count in the stretch and 3 count in the pause. And then when I move into the seated, I will do the 2 to 5 tempo, where I'm doing 2 count pause in the peak contraction and then a 5-count pause in the stretch. So I like to do one set where I focus on really fatiguing the muscle from the shortened position, and then the second set is I like to fatigue the muscle from the fully stretched position. So that's what you're watching here right now is the 2 sets of calves, and then from here I move on to the tib raise. So I'm doing 3 sets of calves, and I like to do my calf training at the beginning of the session for the same reason that I mentioned about the delt and the bicep work. When I get done with the end of a leg session, like after I do my max effort sets of my compound work, whether that be leg press, hack squat, both, it just kind of depends on the session and how I feel that day. It's really, really hard for me mentally and kind of physically to want to do some of this fluff work at the end. Usually what happens with my calf training is if I do it at the very end, I find that it's really half-assed and I'm just trying to rush it to kind of get it done with so I can get out of the gym, because by that point I'm pretty fucking tired. So I've found that by doing my calf training at the beginning of the session, 1, I can put more effort into it because I'm not as fatigued, and 2, I don't feel like I need to rush it because I know that the calf work really isn't that fatiguing and it isn't going to take away from anything else that I'm doing within the session. So I like to just kind of get it done at the beginning, knock it out, and then move on to the stuff that actually matters. So that the way that the leg sessions are kind of set up right now is that the most demanding movements are done at the very end. So it's kind of nice for me to go in and just get my compound work done, and then as soon as the compound work is done, I pretty much go home. So I really am enjoying that setup with my leg training. So you're watching the tib raise here. I like to do these single leg, again, for the same reason as the biceps. They just kind of feel like it lines up a little bit better and feels a little bit better on my ankles to do these single leg than to do them with both legs in at the same time. So now that the quote-unquote fluff work is done, the delt and bicep work and the calves are done, we're going to get into the meat and the potatoes of this session here. So we're starting off with the adductor. On this particular rotation, I'm doing a 3-count pause in the peak contraction of my adductors, and then I'm doing a 1 count pause in the other one. So I'm having one day where I'm doing kind of shortened focus, which is this one, what you're watching, and then another day where I'm doing more continuous style reps. What I'm shooting for on this particular, on this particular rotation is I like to be able to hit a weight for 15 reps, all 15 reps with a 3 count pause in the contraction and then a 5 count eccentric. When I can hit a certain weight for 15 reps, I will increase the weight and continue from there. So the upper end of this rep range is 15 reps. On the other rotation where I'm just doing a 1 count pause in the peak contraction, I like to keep the reps a little higher, and I like to keep them at 20. In general, I like to keep my reps higher with the adductor just for safety purposes, because the adductor machine and the adductor muscles themselves are really kind of fragile. And from everyone and everything that I have read in regards to adductor tears, it is an extremely excruciatingly painful injury. So I have zero intentions of tearing any muscles in my adductors. Obviously, shit happens, but in order to try and prevent that from happening, there are 2 things that I like to do. I mean, maybe 3, I guess. One would be spending time in the paused, which is what you're watching here. The 2 main ones is I like to do a really long eccentric. So I have a 5 count eccentric, and at certain times on this, it actually gets a bit longer than a 5 count eccentric. And then the third thing that I like to do is I like to keep my repetitions really high. I don't like to do anything below 15 reps for the adductor. I just don't feel the risk versus the reward is there. You have to remember that your adductors are going to be getting some work when you're doing your compound work, like your leg presses and your squats or whatever. So I'm really focused on training the adductors in the fully shortened range at this point in the session, because I know when it comes to getting them fully stretched and lengthened, that's going to happen by nature when I hop on the leg press and the hack. So at the beginning of the session, I'm really focused on just getting the adductors through a full range of motion and spending some time in the shortened position. Really nice long eccentrics, stay safe, keep the reps high, and as always, keep the effort at maximum intensity. So I'm only doing 1 set here, again, because I'm moving and training legs so frequently. So in just 3 days from this clip, I'll be doing it all again. So I need to be able to recover from it in just 2 nights of sleep. So from here, we go into the lying ham curl. On my other leg rotation, this is a seated hamstring curl. So I just rotate between the lying and the seated. This may or may not be hard to tell from the picture, but if you can see where my arms are, at the bottom, I have a pair of dumbbells on the floor. I really like this lying hamstring curl machine, but the only thing that I don't like about most hamstring curls machines, but this one in particular, is the location of the handles. So if you can kind of imagine where my body is here, if I were to put my elbows and forearms on the pads and then put my hands on the handles where they're supposed to be, that's going to kind of create like an anterior tilt in my spine, and it's going to have me arching my back. That's something that I'm trying to avoid. What I'm trying to do when I'm doing my lying hamstring curls is I'm almost thinking of posteriorly tilting my pelvis and keeping my spine neutral and kind of draped over the pad here, and then I'm bracing through my lats to kind of set my back as if I was for a bench press. The way that the handles are set up on this machine, getting in that position is very difficult because the location of the handles kind of forces an arch in your back. So I like to keep my arms below me. That helps me keep my spine more neutral and my pelvis posteriorly tilted. But there are no handles on the machine for me to grab onto so that I can grip hard and kind of set my lats. So I created handles by putting a pair of dumbbells on the floor. I think these are like 40 or 50 pounds. Just something that's heavy enough to where when I grab with my hands and I squeeze tight and I set my back and I'm driving through my hips, that the dumbbells don't pick up off the floor. Like I would never do these with like 20-pound dumbbells. It would just be too light. I'd be picking them up off the ground. If you're watching, sometimes these dumbbells are kind of sliding around. So maybe I need to go a little bit heavier than the 40s or whatever I have here. I can't really tell. The video's cutting it off. But that's just kind of a good tip for you guys. If a machine is not set up in a way that really fits your body, let set up your body in a way that fits the machine. So I bring the dumbbells down here so that it just kind of makes it a more natural position. From here, I'm going into the leg extension. I'm only doing one set of leg extension and one set of ham curls, obviously. Again, I'm training legs very, very frequently, so the volume has to be low so that I can recover. So here I'm in the leg extension. I'm doing a 3-count pause at the peak contraction. The leg extension is really the only exercise that trains the quad from the fully shortened position, so I like to spend time in the fully shortened position with it. So I'm using a 3-count pause at the peak contraction, and then I'm using a 5-count eccentric. Same kind of setup as the adductor and the hamstring curl. I'm aiming for a top set of about 15 reps, and then once I hit 15 reps, I will increase the weight and just repeat the process. And the goal is to get as strong as physically possible for 15 reps with a 3-count pause on this particular exercise. So I'm doing these leg extensions to kind of warm up my knees and warm up my quads before I get into the compound movements, the things that actually matter the most. So I'm really liking the idea of somewhat pre-exhausting the muscle before I get into the compound exercise. It's kind of keeping my knees feeling good, and it's also increases kind of the quad recruitment that I'm getting out of my compound movements, because I have a better mind-muscle connection with the quads because they're pretty pumped up by the time I get to the leg press. Hard to tell here, but I'm using a pair of straps like you would use for back training. And when the reps start to get really hard here, I'm really pulling as hard as I can into the handles and driving my hips down and trying to create as much leverage and force as I can that way. So from here, there's absolutely nowhere that I can go. So the set is over. So now we're getting into the meat and potatoes here of the session. So this is the Icarian leg press. This is really difficult to tell from the video, but where my spotter is standing behind him is actually a pivot leg press. You can kind of see it when I'm at peak, when I'm at the top of the range of motion here. Normally on this session, I'm using the pivot leg press, and then on the other leg session, I'm using this one, the Icarian. So I like to use 2 different leg presses to kind of keep some variety. The problem is that the pivot leg press that I normally use has been broken for quite a while now. So now it's what I've been doing is on this particular leg rotation, I'm doing the Icarian leg press, and I'm just doing it as you see. And then on the other leg session, I'm actually doing the same leg press, but I'm doing it with bands. So I loop bands around the handles that I'm grabbing onto, and then the other end of the band onto the weight pull. And I'm setting that up in a way that has accommodating resistance so that as I'm driving through, the weight actually gets heavier. So I just like to have 2 different variations of the same leg press right now, because the other leg press that I like to use is broken. I'm hoping that the pivot leg press gets fixed soon, because I really, really like the pivot leg presses. They feel super natural on my hips and my back. So I really like the pivot leg presses more than these style of 45s, but right now I just kind of have to make it work with what I got. So the Icarian leg press is going to be the main one going forward. Again, one session I'll be doing traditional, which is what you're seeing now. And then after that, I'll be doing it with some bands on for accommodating resistance. Speaking of bands, after I do one max effort set of the leg press, I like to get into one max effort set of a hack squat. On one leg session, this one, I like to use a reverse band, which you can see the purple bands on the back. And then on the other leg session, I do it straight. So I won't use any bands. What you're watching with the reverse banded hacks here is I'm also doing a 3-count pause in the fully stretched position. The reverse bands take a little bit of weight out of the bottom of the exercise, which saves my knee joints. On the rotation where I do not have the reverse bands, I don't pause these reps in the bottom, at least not as long. I may have a slight pause at the bottom and then I get right back up to the top, but I'm not pausing as long as I am here. Here I'm doing a 3-count pause, so I'm counting 3, 2, 1 in the bottom, and then I'm driving out. I really like the reverse bands on this exercise, particularly because it allows me to pause in the bottom. If I pause in the bottom without any bands, when I go to drive out of that pause, I just feel a ton of shear on my knees, my right knee specifically. And the hack squat kind of has a bad reputation for tearing people's knees up. So this is kind of a good way that I have found to mitigate that, is to just reverse band it. Takes a little bit of weight out of the bottom. Yes, it technically does make the exercise a little bit easier, but just because it makes the exercise a little bit easier, I don't think that means that it makes the exercise easy. This exercise is still really difficult with the reverse bands, especially if you're adding a pause in the bottom. It's still really, really difficult. So just because you see reverse bands on an exercise doesn't mean that someone's necessarily taking the easy way out. It just means maybe they're kind of taking a different way around to reach the same goal. And that's definitely what I like to do here. So after 2 max effort sets, 1 on the leg press and 1 on the hack, by this point I'm pretty much fucked. So from here I go into usually a glute ham focus exercise, and then this is the end of the session. So this particular one, I'm doing the Nautilus glute drive. On the other rotation, I do a 45-degree hyperextension where I focus on eccentrically lowering through the glutes and the hamstrings and keeping more tension on the posterior than the spinal erectors. I'm actually considering dropping out this part of the session because I'm experiencing some tendonitis in my glutes and my hamstrings. And I just think that kind of getting rid of this exercise is going to help mitigate some of that pain and overuse. I'm getting plenty of glute work out of the compound exercises, the leg press and the hack, and I also have pretty strong glutes, so I don't really need to do any direct glute work, but I'm still just kind of choosing to do it just to kind of dot all my I's and cross all my T's. So again, guys, if you have any questions about this session, feel free to ask and let me know, and I'll be happy to answer. And as always, guys, take care. Thanks for watching, and have a good rest of your day.
Watch